Rome, 170 AD. Marcus Aurelius sits in a war tent on the Danube frontier. Rain is hammering the canvas above his head. Somewhere past the tree line, tribes he cannot see are moving in the dark, and every soldier in that camp knows morning might bring an attack. And in the middle of all that danger, the most powerful man in the known world picks up a pen. He doesn't write battle orders. He doesn't write letters begging for reinforcements. He writes to himself, about his own mind, about how to keep it steady while everything around him is trying to tear it apart. That journal survived. We call it Meditations now. And the fact that we're still reading it 2,000 years later tells you something important. The battle for your mind has always mattered more than the battle around it. You don't have tribes camped outside your tent. You have something quieter and in some ways more dangerous. You have a phone that buzzes 40 times a day. You have 17 tabs open, each one begging to be the next thing you look at. You have an algorithm on the other end of every app, built by rooms full of engineers whose entire job is to take your focus away from you and never give it back. Most people are losing this war, and they don't even know they're fighting it. The Stoics understood something that we have almost completely forgotten in the modern world. Your attention is the most valuable thing you will ever own. Not your money, not your time even. Your attention, because wherever your attention goes, your energy follows it. And wherever your energy goes, your life follows right behind it. You do not drift into a wasted life by accident. You get there one stolen minute at a time. Think about the last time you actually finished something that mattered, not scrolled through it, not skimmed it while 3 other tabs sat open in the background, waiting their turn. Actually, sat with one task, start to finish, with nothing pulling at the edges of your mind. If you're struggling to remember, you're not alone, and you're not broken. You've just been trained, slowly and without your consent, by a world that profits every single time your focus breaks. That's the part almost nobody says out loud. Losing your focus isn't a personal failure. It's the intended outcome of billions of dollars spent by companies whose entire business model depends on your mind never settling anywhere for very long. Every ping, every red notification bubble, every autoplay countdown was tested, refined, and shipped by people who studied exactly how minds like yours work, and then built tools specifically designed to exploit it. But here's what those companies can never take from you, no matter how good their engineers get. They can build the temptation. They cannot make you pick up the phone. That choice, in the 60 seconds after the temptation appears, still belongs entirely to you. And the Stoics, 2,000 years before any of this technology existed, already understood exactly how to win that fight. Today, you're getting 10 rules, every one of them pulled from real Stoic thinking, translated into something you can actually use the next time your phone lights up on the desk in front of you. Stay with me through all 10, because the 7th rule is the one almost everyone gets backwards, and once you understand it, it will change the way you think about rest for the rest of your life. Let's begin. Rule 1. Guard the gate. Epictetus taught his students to picture the mind as a house with a single door. Every thought that wants in has to knock first. Every image, every piece of gossip, every headline, every notification, all of it stands outside that door, waiting to be let in. Most people don't guard that door. They leave it wide open, day and night, and they let anything walk through. Outrage from a stranger's opinion, comparison from someone else's highlight reel, noise that has nothing to do with the life they're actually trying to build. And then they wonder why the inside of their head feels like a house that's been ransacked. Here's what you have to understand about the modern version of this problem. Your phone is not a neutral object sitting quietly on your desk. Every app on that screen was built by teams of people whose entire salary depends on breaking through your gate. They are not interested in a few minutes of your time. They are interested in your attention because your attention is the product they sell to advertisers. You are not the customer, you are the inventory. And if you refuse to guard your own door, somebody else will happily walk through it and start rearranging the furniture of your mind without asking your permission. This is the first shift you have to make, and it has to happen before any of the other 9 rules will work. You have to start treating your attention the way you'd treat the front door of your actual home. You don't let strangers walk in and sit on your couch just because they knocked. You decide who gets in. You decide what deserves a seat at the table of your mind, and everything else stays outside, no matter how loud it knocks. This isn't about deleting every app or throwing your phone in a lake. It's about becoming the kind of person who pauses at the door and asks one honest question before letting anything through. Does this actually deserve a piece of my attention today? Most of the time, the answer is no. And once you start asking that question on purpose, you'll be shocked at how much of what used to control your day was never worth letting in. Comment, "I control my attention," below if you're ready to start guarding yours. Rule 2. The dichotomy of focus. Everything Epictetus taught can be traced back to one single dividing line. Some things in life are within your control, everything else is not. And the moment you pour your energy into the second category, you have already lost, because you're fighting a war you were never equipped to win. Now take that same dividing line and lay it directly over your focus. You cannot control whether a notification appears on your screen. You cannot control whether your coworker walks over and interrupts your train of thought right when you finally found it. You cannot control whether the news decides to explode with something new to be afraid of today. None of that belongs to you. None of it was ever yours to command. But here is what belongs to you completely. You control whether you pick the phone up. You control whether your thumb taps that notification open. You control what you do in the 60 seconds right after a distraction shows up, uninvited, at your door. Most people fight the wrong battle their entire lives. They try to build a world with 0 distractions in it, and that world does not exist and never will. You cannot delete the internet. You cannot make your co-workers disappear. You cannot force the world to go quiet just because you need to concentrate. That fight was lost before it started. The Stoic fights a smaller, sharper battle. Not the impossible war against every distraction that could ever exist, just the 60 seconds after one shows up. That's it. That's the entire battlefield, and it's the only one that was ever actually yours. Win those 60 seconds over and over all day long, and you will have more control over your focus than 90% of people walking around with a phone in their pocket. Stop trying to control the ocean. Start controlling the boat. Comment, "This is mine," if you're ready to fight the right battle starting today. Rule 3. The view from above. There's a mental exercise Marcus Aurelius returned to again and again all through his life, and he called it the view from above. He would imagine himself rising up out of his own body, higher and higher, until the palace he lived in became a speck, until Rome itself became a smudge on the curve of the earth, until his entire life, his worries, his arguments, the small irritations of his day, shrank down to something almost too small to see. He didn't do this to feel insignificant. He did it because it worked. It took whatever felt urgent in that moment and revealed how small it actually was, and it took whatever actually mattered and let it stand out clearly, without all the noise crowding around it. Try it right now, in this exact second. Something is probably tugging at the edge of your attention as you listen to this. A text you haven't answered. A headline you glanced at an hour ago that's still sitting uncomfortably in your chest. A comment someone made yesterday that you're still turning over in your mind for the 100th time. Now zoom out. Picture your entire life from 100 feet above the ground. Picture it from a mile up. From the edge of the atmosphere, looking down at a tiny blue and green marble. Is that thing pulling at your attention actually a piece of the life you're building? Or is it noise that only feels enormous because it's 3 inches from your face? Distance creates clarity. It always has. The people who make the worst decisions are almost never the people who lack information. They're the people standing too close to the problem to see it clearly. The Stoics figured this out long before anyone had a word for mental clutter, long before anyone needed a word for it, because their world wasn't yet buried under the sheer volume of information ours is. Use this whenever your focus starts slipping. Rise, zoom out. Look down at the thing that felt so urgent a second ago. 9 times out of 10, it gets smaller the higher you go, and once it's small, it stops being able to control you. Comment, I see clearly, the moment you feel yourself zoom out. Rule 4. One thing fully. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius about a sickness he saw spreading through Rome, and it wasn't a sickness of the body. It was a sickness of attention. He watched people jump from one pursuit to the next, never finishing anything, never staying with a single task long enough to actually master it, and he warned that a mind stretched across everything ends up living nowhere at all. Read that again, because it was written for your life more than it was ever written for his. You open your laptop to write one email. A notification slides across the top of your screen. You glance at it for 2 seconds, and now you're somewhere else entirely. A different tab, a different train of thought, a different task, competing for the same narrow strip of attention you started with. By the end of the day, you've touched 20 different things. You answered a few messages, you opened a dozen tabs, you watched half a video, and you finished almost nothing, because nothing ever got your full weight. It only ever got a slice of you, torn between 5 directions at once. That is not productivity, that is motion, pretending to be progress. And it is exhausting in a way that real deep work never is, because scattered attention burns fuel without ever moving the car forward. Seneca's answer to this was almost embarrassingly simple. Choose fewer things, and give the ones you choose your entire weight, not a scattered fraction of it. Not half your mind while the other half waits for the next notification. All of it, completely, for as long as the task requires. The next time you sit down to actually work, pick one single thing before your hands even touch the keyboard, just one. Close every other tab. Put the phone in another room, not just face down on the desk, because face down is not out of reach. It's still a temptation wearing a disguise. Let that one task have all of you for the next hour, uninterrupted, undivided. You will get more done in that single focused hour than you managed across the last 3 scattered, fragmented days combined. Not because you worked harder, because for the first time in a long time, you actually showed up completely for something, instead of showing up in pieces for everything. Comment, I finish what I start, the second you close every other tab. Rule 5. Train like an athlete. Epictetus compared the untrained mind to an athlete who shows up to compete without ever having trained. No serious competitor walks onto the field cold, expecting their body to perform under pressure it has never faced before. Strength gets built quietly, privately, day after day, long before anyone is watching, long before the competition ever begins. Your focus is built the exact same way, and most people never realize this until it's too late. You cannot sit down one random Tuesday and expect to concentrate deeply for 3 straight hours if you have spent the last 3 years training your brain to switch tasks every 90 seconds. That kind of deep, sustained attention is a skill. It has to be built deliberately, the same way a muscle gets built, through resistance, repetition, and time. So start small, genuinely small. 10 minutes, that's it. 10 minutes of pure, undistracted focus on one single task. No phone in the room, not even in your pocket. No second screen glowing in your peripheral vision. Just you and the work directly in front of you. Tomorrow, push it to 12 minutes. The day after, 15. You are not trying to become a monk overnight, and you shouldn't expect to. You are training a muscle that has quietly atrophied from years of constant low-grade interruption, and muscles that have atrophied don't come back in a single session. They come back one honest rep at a time. This is the part almost nobody wants to hear because it isn't glamorous and it doesn't happen overnight. Discipline is not a personality trait some people are lucky enough to be born with. It is not something you either have or you don't. It is something you build, slowly, rep by rep, the same way you'd build strength in a gym, through consistency, not intensity, and definitely not through a single burst of motivation that fades by Thursday. Think about anyone you've ever admired for their focus, a writer who finishes books, an athlete who trains alone before sunrise, anyone who seems to move through the world without getting pulled apart by every small distraction that crosses their path. None of them started there. Every one of them had a first 10 minutes at some point when their mind wandered constantly and staying on task felt almost unbearable. The difference between them and everyone else isn't natural talent. It's that they kept showing up for the next 10 minutes anyway, long after it stopped feeling difficult and started feeling like nothing at all. Start your first rep today, not next Monday, not after this video ends and life gets in the way. Today. Comment, I build discipline daily, if today is the day your first rep happens. Rule 6. The obstacle is fuel. Marcus Aurelius wrote a line that has outlived empires. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Sit with that for a second, because it applies directly to the war happening on your desk right now. Distraction itself is not your enemy. It never was. Your relationship to distraction is the actual enemy, and that relationship can be rebuilt piece by piece, starting the next time your phone buzzes. Every single time a notification pulls at your attention and you choose deliberately not to look, you have not lost anything in that moment. You have won. You are building the exact muscle you need for tomorrow, for next week, for the version of your life you're actually trying to construct. Every craving to check your phone that you notice, sit with, and let pass without acting on it is a rep. It is quietly making you stronger for the next craving that shows up an hour later. Stop waiting for distractions to disappear from your life, because they won't. The world is only going to get louder from here, not quieter. More apps, more notifications, more things engineered specifically to fracture your attention into smaller and smaller pieces. That trend is not reversing. Nobody is coming to save you from it. Your job was never to wait around for a distraction-free world that will never arrive. Your job is to become the kind of person that distraction can no longer move, no matter how loud it gets, no matter how many times it knocks on your door in a single hour. Every obstacle you face today is not something blocking your path. It is the exact material your discipline is built from. Take away the resistance, and you take away the reason your strength ever grows in the first place. Comment, nothing moves me, if you're ready to turn today's distractions into tomorrow's fuel. Rule 7. The most misunderstood rule. Stillness is not laziness. Here is where almost everyone gets it backwards, and if you only remember one rule from this entire video, let it be this one. Most people believe deep focus means constant motion, grinding every hour of the day, hustling from the second they wake up until the second they collapse into bed, filling every available minute with output because somewhere along the way, rest quietly became a synonym for laziness in the modern mind. Seneca said the exact opposite, and he said it clearly. A mind that never rests eventually loses the ability to focus on anything at all. He compared an overworked mind to a field that's farmed every single season without ever being allowed to lie fallow. For a while, that field still produces. It looks fine from a distance. but eventually the soil gives out completely, and nothing will grow there again until it's given the rest it was always owed. Deep focus requires deep rest. Not scrolling. Scrolling isn't rest, no matter how much it feels like it in the moment. Scrolling is just a quieter, more addictive form of noise, dressed up to look like a break. Real rest looks different. It looks like silence. It looks like staring at a wall with no goal attached to it. It looks like a walk with no phone in your pocket and no destination in mind. It looks like letting your mind be bored on purpose, without immediately reaching for something to fill that boredom. The people who focus the deepest, who produce the kind of work that actually lasts, are almost never the people grinding every waking hour without pause. They are the people who protect their stillness with the exact same discipline they protect their work with. Because stillness isn't the absence of progress. Stillness is where the mind quietly repairs itself, where ideas connect that never would have connected in the middle of constant noise, where the soil gets its season to recover before the next planting. If you've spent years running yourself into the ground, believing exhaustion was the price you had to pay for focus, you've had the entire equation backwards. Rest was never the enemy of your focus. It was always the foundation underneath it. Notice how this rule quietly undoes the guilt so many people carry around rest in the first place. You don't need to earn stillness by exhausting yourself first. You don't need to justify a walk with no destination, or an evening with no screen in front of you, by pointing to everything you accomplished earlier in the day. The field doesn't need permission to lie fallow. It simply needs the season, and so does your mind. Give it that season on purpose, before burnout forces it on you anyway, and you'll find your focus waiting for you on the other side, sharper than it's been in years. Comment, I rest to rise. If this just changed the way you think about rest. Rule 8. Judge the thought, not the moment. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself almost daily in the pages of his own private journal that it is not events themselves that disturb us. It is our judgment about those events. Strip away the interpretation, and most things that feel urgent are revealed to have no actual power over you at all. Apply that directly to the buzz in your pocket. A notification, stripped down to what it actually is nothing more than a sound and a flash of light. That's it. It has zero inherent power over your mind. The disturbance only happens the instant your brain decides, often without your permission, that this particular sound means something urgent, something that can't wait, something that demands your attention right now. Practice catching that judgment before it hijacks your entire afternoon. The next time your phone buzzes, pause for 1 full second before you reach for it. Ask yourself honestly, is this actually urgent, or does it just feel urgent because it was specifically designed to feel that way? 9 times out of 10, whatever it is can wait an hour. It can probably wait until tomorrow. The emergency you felt in your chest was almost never real. It was manufactured, carefully and deliberately, by an app whose entire business model depends on your sense of panic. Once you see that clearly, once you actually catch the trick in real time instead of falling for it automatically, the buzzing loses its grip on you completely. It goes back to being exactly what it always was underneath the manufactured urgency, just a sound, nothing more. Comment, I choose my response. The moment you catch that trick for yourself. Rule 9. Memento mori for your attention. The Stoics kept death close to their thinking, not out of some morbid obsession, but because nothing sharpens your sense of what actually matters quite like remembering that your time is not infinite. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly, in the quiet of his own tent, that he could leave this life at any moment, and that single fact shaped how he chose to spend every single hour he had left. Now apply that same lens to your attention specifically, because your attention is not infinite either. You will not get today back, not one single hour of it, no matter how much you might want a refund later. If you spend 3 hours of today scrolling through the curated, filtered highlight reels of people you've never actually met, that time is gone. Permanently. Spent on something that will mean nothing to you in a week, let alone a year, let alone on the day you're looking back at your whole life and asking what it actually added up to. Ask yourself this question before you open any app, before you let anything through the gate you're supposed to be guarding. If this were the very last focused hour I had left, would I really choose to spend it here, doing this? That question alone, asked honestly and asked often, will completely change what you reach for. It has a way of making the trivial things fall away almost immediately, because nothing clarifies your priorities quite like remembering they are not unlimited. Comment, "My time is sacred," if you just felt that shift happen in real time. Rule 10. Become unbothered. Epictetus taught that the entire point of this kind of training was never perfection. It was becoming the kind of person who simply isn't moved anymore by things that used to control them completely, not through gritted teeth, not through white-knuckle willpower, forcing yourself through sheer effort every single time, through calm, repeated practice, until staying focused stops being something you have to fight for and simply becomes who you are. That is the real prize hiding underneath all 9 rules that came before this one. Not a perfect, distraction-free life, because that life does not exist for anyone, no matter how disciplined they become. The real prize is becoming someone the noise can no longer reach. Someone who can sit in a room full of pinging phones, blaring headlines, and endless demands for their attention, and simply keep working, calm, undisturbed, steady, the exact way Marcus Aurelius sat in that tent on the Danube frontier with enemies camped just beyond the trees. That is not a personality trait some people are lucky enough to be handed at birth. It is a skill, built one deliberate rep at a time, the same way every skill worth having has ever been built. And if you've made it this far, listening closely, actually thinking through each of these 10 rules instead of letting them wash over you, you have already started building it. Comment, "Nothing shakes me," if that's the person you're becoming starting today. 10 rules. Every single one of them built on the same foundation the Stoics discovered more than 2,000 years ago, long before anyone had a name for the modern distractions competing for your mind right now. Your attention is the one thing in this entire world that is completely, undeniably yours. No one can take it from you without your permission. Not an app, not a notification, not a headline engineered specifically to make your heart rate spike. None of it has any real power over your mind unless you hand that power over yourself, one small surrender at a time. Marcus Aurelius never had a smartphone buzzing in his pocket. He had an actual war waiting just outside his tent, real danger, real consequences, real reasons to lose focus completely. You have a different kind of war, quieter but no less real, sitting in your pocket right now. But the weapon required to win it has never changed. It was true 2,000 years ago in that tent on the Danube, and it's true today. A trained mind, a disciplined mind, a mind that has learned through repetition and patience how to stay steady no matter how loud the world around it gets. You don't need to apply all 10 of these rules today. You don't need to become a finished, unshakable version of yourself by tomorrow morning. That expectation alone is enough to make most people give up before they even start, because perfection was never the goal and it never will be. Pick one. Just one rule from everything you just heard. Maybe it's guarding the gate the next time your phone lights up. Maybe it's 10 honest minutes of undistracted work before you let yourself check anything else. Maybe it's simply sitting in silence for 5 minutes tonight with no goal attached, just to remind your mind what real rest actually feels like. Practice that one rule today, not perfectly, just once, honestly. That is how every single Stoic discipline in history ever actually started. One small, imperfect rep, repeated patiently day after day, until it quietly stopped being a practice and simply became who someone was. Marcus Aurelius wasn't born with a steady mind. He built it, one journal entry at a time, in the middle of wars, betrayals, and grief that would have broken most people. If he could build that kind of discipline under those conditions, you can build a fraction of it while sitting at a desk with a phone buzzing next to your coffee. If this changed the way you think about your own focus, even slightly, hit subscribe, because next week we're going even deeper into how the Stoics trained themselves to stay calm under real pressure. Not just everyday distraction, but actual chaos, actual loss, actual hardship, and how that same steady mind carried them through all of it. Comment Stoic if you're staying on this journey with us. Until then, guard your attention like it's the most valuable thing you will ever own, because it is. It always has been.